And we are finally underway. That's good. Can you guys see that okay? You see the screen? All righty, and we're recording, so that's good. Um, Today we're in week 251, looking at John's Gospel, chapter 19. We're getting very close, fellas, to the crucifixion itself, which covers 3 verses of description in chapter 19, verses 16, 17, and 18. So
Mike,
we're still building up to that event. And of course, when we get to that, we'll talk extensively about that. But
we lost everybody else except me. There's only you and me on there.
it could be your setting. I have everybody on the screen.
Yeah, I see
Oh,
Tatsi. I see Tatsi and hear him.
Yeah.
there's
Tatsi,
Bill again.
I think it's your setting that I think you got to go to screen setting, I think. Tatsi, can you see the overhead?
I see Bill and I see you.
Uh,
Hmm.
how about the rest of you guys? Can you see the screen?
I see Vincent. I see 5 people. I'm missing Dave Brown.
Yeah, I don't have Dave either. He may have left, so just for whatever reason. But anyway, Tatsi, I'm gonna. Oh, he just went off. So I'm gonna go ahead and begin. But um, today's session, we're kind of introducing what I would call a technical ride, because as we approach the cross, it is really imperative to me that we look at this from the perspective of what John the writer is attempting to write. The unfortunate thing is, well, there's a fortunate and unfortunate aspect of this. The fortunate thing is we all have been in the faith for quite some time. But in that journey, we have been taught and um, adhered to a certain way of interpreting this section. And I'm asking you to, and I'm going to be providing various materials, not to convince you otherwise. You are free to believe and look at the cross however you want to look at it. But as we enter into this and we work verse by verse as John, it would really be helpful to look at some various perspectives. We've got a 2,000-year history, and there are numerous ways Christians throughout history have looked at the cross. Now, outside of Christian orthodoxy, there are numerous views of the cross. Those within the Orthodox faith that goes back to the beginning 2nd century, second to fourth, they view every congregation views the cross, everybody all the same. But that is not the same, especially in Protestantism. And this is not meant to confuse you at all. But I'm going to introduce some introductory materials and show you how to get access at the end of um, this section. And we may not have table time because of that, because I'll show you how to navigate, how to get the material. It'll be super easy. It'll be real easy. So we're now just moving into that. Um, and there'll be a short explanation or an introduction to that today, week 251. And I've entitled this session Loss. It has to do with loss. And of course, I will explain what I mean by that as the lesson develops. Here is the text, John 19, 9 through 11. Jesus is standing before Pilate. This is the civil Roman trial that John has taken some extensive time with. Pilate, enters the praetorium, that is the judgment pavement of this, basically call it the courthouse where this all takes place. This is actually the council or the judge. What do you call it? Not judge. A judge is in this room. What do you call it? A court? This is like the courtroom. And Jesus said, and he said to Jesus, Pilate says, "Where are you from?" Of course, we raise our hands. But Jesus gave him no answer. So Pilate said to him, "Are you not speaking to me? Do you not know that I have authority to release you and I have authority to crucify you?" Jesus answered him, "You have no authority over me at all, if it had not been given to you from above. For this reason, the one who handed me over to you has the greater sin." That is a loaded text, and we're going to unpack it. So I'm going to introduce the idea of the lens to read this is what it's like being lost. Now, that very term, because of our commonly shared Christian roots, we probably have a general idea of how we interpret being lost. We mean a person outside of the fold of Christian faith who are lost in their sins, and if they die in that state, God sends them to an eternal conscious torment. You may not all buy that or buy into that particular narrow perspective, but that is, in a general sense, we look at this from that, we look at being lost from that realm. I'm not talking about that. Being lost is a state where we lose all footing from reality. And that is how I'm looking at this text. And I would say Pilate is a person representing humanity who represents what it's like being lost. Pilate is in a state of ping and pong. He's on the table being bounced back and forth. He does have no footing at all. He's lost his footing for clarity and judgment. He's bouncing between ping and pong. His vision of reality has narrowed to mere survival. There is no strategic thinking in his questioning. Feeling lost, he responds in the moment the only way he knows how to do, and that's bear down harder. I know this quite well. Just try harder. And that is how we're casting this Roman ruler. And I would say thus, what we humans tend towards is this kind of thing. This is not a Pilate demonstration, although it is, but it is a representation of what we humans tend to do under extreme pressure. We seek our own devices. Now, how this text is commonly perceived is this way. In the trial before Pilate, Jesus' silence, we're going to talk about silence. And it's been read from two perspectives, how to look at the person of Jesus under this trial before he goes to the cross. And you've seen this image, we've used it numerous ways. The first, and I'm going to give you some technical terms here, and I don't mean to be uppity by any means, but this gives way to the papers that I'm going to point you guys towards so you can understand what we're talking about. It depends on how you view the cross. And there is what's called the ransom perspective, goes way back to the beginning of the faith in the 3rd, 4th century, the early fathers, the ransom theory, or later a complementary theory. And I don't expect you to understand the nuances. You may already know this, what's called the Christus Victor perspective. But from this perspective, Jesus's restraint in this silence, it's all about strategy. Guys, I'm not denying any of this. I'm just saying, I'm just stating a perspective. And the way this is interpreted, the silence of Jesus before Pilate, God in flesh, the incarnation, willingly submitting to death so that evil itself might be deceived. Now that's within the ransom theory. There is kind of a trickery idea, tricking the devil and tricking it. There's this kind of nuance as one aspect of it. And ultimately, the devil and death and Hades, and it's all defeated through the cross event and through the resurrection. So Jesus is holding back. He's holding back, and for a reason. And it's all going to be about this victory. And it's like we don't see all his cards. He's got this plan, this strategic plan to overcome the devil, beat the devil. And that is from one perspective. Why the silence? From another perspective, it's actually an entirely different camp, of which most of us if not all of us on this call, have been dramatically influenced by, is the penal substitutionary atonement perspective. And from this perspective, his silence shows obedience and resolve to the Father. Jesus accepts the path of the cross to bear the penalty of what God the Father is requiring of death by sin. Blood has to be shed to satisfy his own justice. That's the penal substitutionary atonement that was inaugurated in the 16th century through John Calvin and the other reformers. But it's quite a late player, but it happens to be what most of our roots are from, being from an evangelical community. So it depends on how you view it, but it's the idea that God is veiled here. God is veiled, depending in both of these different perspectives. In the supplementary material that I'm going to provide you, that gives definition and they show correlation in all this. So don't be thinking about, God, what's going to be on the test, or do I have the right perspective? Please don't. We are looking and diving into this collectively to try to bring about understanding of how John is casting this out. So in either reading, Jesus's refusal to resist becomes the very means through which God's act of bringing together reconciliation. That is where the two camps come together. The cross is the central point of all history where God's reconciliation takes place. The means or the mechanism of how that works is there's various perspectives, but the cross is a big deal. Now, here is another way that this is how I tend to look at it, not to dispel the others entirely, but I think there is and I'm not alone by any means in looking at this. If you look at, I'll be quoting theologians later, but not in this book. But this is a common way to look at it, and I think it's helpful. In this same scene right here, rather than the veiling of Jesus, there's another way to look at it. Jesus' silence from a different perspective, notice how the screen went blurry, except for the person of Jesus. Jesus' silence is not primarily strategic, that he's holding back strategically to conquer something. He's not going to conquer death by the way we tend to think of conquering death. through having a bigger club? Or is it submissive, where he's submitting to the wrath of God to pay a debt that's required, that God requires? It's rooted fully, rather, his presence is rooted fully in an entirely different kingdom. Now, I get this. I feel John is leading us down this path, and I'm referring to in John 18:36, where Jesus, I mean, just a few verses before this, my kingdom is not of this world. He is pointing out two different kingdoms, and Jesus is rooted within one kingdom, and the kingdom of this world is what we see happening on the screen before us. And this kingdom of his world is breaking in at this moment right before our eyes. Pilate's blurred confusion that we see within, where are you from? Where in the world? What does that have anything to do with? Pilate's blurred confusion and the crowd's frenzy reveal the kingdom of this world, what this world is like, this kingdom. A realm ruled by fear, coercion, and illusion. And that's what this image is showing us. Jesus is looking on. They're not all playing in the same sandbox here. There's two different things going on. And what we see is the revelation, not the veiling, but the revelation of the kingdom of God through the incarnate Son. Yet within the distortion that's going on, this pointing of the fingers and this power trip and all this, Jesus remains composed, transparent, and free, and he's embodying the divine love of God, the divine love entering human darkness through the incarnation. His calm presence is the revelation. That is the key word here, fellas. That is in contrast to what I first read. It's not veiling, it's revelation. We're seeing what God is like in human flesh. Just how far God will go, what love looks like when it meets the world's powers. So this image right here would be a good thing, at least for our study, how at least I'm perceiving what is happening before our eyes. There is the kingdom of this world, which is in blur, and the kingdom of his realm that's looking on, which he is stepping into this voluntarily. This then serves as an interpretive key to understand where we're going in just a few weeks here with the cross. Thus, here's my thus. We've laid out two different, a veiling and a revelation. And I tend to camp in the revelation side of things versus the veiling side of things. Of course, we're all free to, hold to it however we wish. What we observe is the breaking in of God's kingdom into the realm of this world. John 18:36. That's in my book an interpretive key of what follows in John chapter 19. So on the left-hand side, the kingdom of this world, what appears like crystal clear focus to us, because we're participating in this kingdom. It's how we do things. Whether we're Christian or not, it's the way the world operates. What appears like clear focus is actually a demonstration of the kingdom of this realm. It's a realm, and I have it in focus. I'll change that on the next to the right. This is how our perception is. Power is being seized fingers are pointing and truth is suppressed. Now, fellas, this is a negative statement, but there's a whole nother side of this. Some of what has been done in the name, notice some, not everything by any means, what has been done in the name of Christianity is horrific. Now, that is one side, just because I don't have room to put the whole statement down. But, fellas, what the church has demonstrated from a positive, life-giving perspective is monumental. I'm reading the book Dominion by Tom Holland. It's like, I don't know, 600 pages of the history of Christianity and how lives have been changed in a life-giving, Christ-like sense. And it's incredible. It's incredible that we take the name of Jesus and what Jesus has done. The influence of this human divine being throughout history is monumental. On the other side of things, I'm stating that here. In the same breath, what we do to each other is absolutely horrific at the individual level. How we can treat our loved ones, how we conduct those who are wayward within the church, and it's sad what's been done in history. I don't have to go into that, but it's like two aspects out of the same belief system, and it's because of this whole idea of how we operate and what Jesus has come to die for, what he's come to break the power of. Within the church, there is this high need to be right. Well, within our Protestant Reformed way of thinking, I mean, it's all a head thing about knowledge and doctrine, and we base acceptance on that, and it creates horrific fights. It's terrible. But there's also on the other side, I don't want to be a downer, there's also a wonderful side of what the church has done. So, because we're talking about a kingdom of this world, of which we and me are just as susceptible to as those outside the faith. Now, on the right-hand side, there's another way to look at this, or the other side of the inbreaking kingdom of what Jesus is doing in this narrative. In reality, the kingdom of his realm is truth standing regardless. So the way I'm casting this, and I have for years, is that there is a realm of which we create. You hear me talk about this all the time. These fictitious things that we manufacture in our heads that are smoke and mirrors that conduct how we live. And it's the false reality. Behind that is the true reality of which Jesus represents, of what is actually exists. And that is the kingdom of this realm that is bulletproof. I mean, the kingdom of his realm, not this realm. His realm, as he's demonstrating here, doesn't need to refute. He doesn't need to defend himself or manipulate others to get what he feels. That's the kingdom of this world. But rather, he stands regardless, silent in truth. And all which does not align with this is actually a chaotic blur because it misaligns with what is. I am saying, or what I'm trying to get across, is there is what is actually true, objective reality, whether I believe it or not, or how I believe it. And there's what I tend towards creating in my own head through various means. And there is a very important distinction between the kingdom of this realm and the kingdom of his realm, as he spoke about in John 18:36, and we see it demonstrated right here a few verses later. So now getting into the text itself, Pilate is threatening. He threatens Jesus, and Pilate entered the praetorium and he said, "Where are you from?" And Jesus gave him no answer, and it really torqued Pilate off. "Are you not speaking to me? Don't you know I have this power to release you or to crucify you?" That's his threat. And this is the kingdom of this realm. Pilate is in a blur. He's a blur. He's lost. His question has nothing to do with information needed to accurately assess as a judge this man, Jesus's innocence or guilty or his guilt. He is just grappling. And he's stalling, he's choking on what he's created. And so he doesn't know what to do. So he does the only thing he knows how. The only club in his bag is power, is clout. And so he says, "Don't you know I have the power?" That's his statement. That's his perspective. "Don't you know that I'm an important person and I can free you, or I can send you to the cross?" And so what he reaches for is what I have reached for on numerous occasions, a bigger hammer to get my way. That is the kingdom of this world. It's exactly what Pilate is doing. Jesus responds to this in verse 11, and he answered him, "You, Pilate, have no authority over me at all, if it had not been given you from above." That's Jesus's response. First of all, notice truth is standing on its own. This is such a graphic example. Jesus said earlier in John, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." He is truth personified, and nothing stands, even his own, the threat of his own security, nothing stands, can thwart his position. He's standing on what is actually real, his relationship with the Father, that which actually exists. He is founded, Pilate is lost. There is the contrast. When Jesus does speak, he doesn't try to defend himself. He even doesn't try to reason with correct Pilate's misunderstanding. He does none of that. He states a fact. Note, see, for him to start reasoning, for him to defend, for him to find Bible verses is actually a demonstration of the kingdom of this power. And this, I'm spending a lot of time on this because I think it is so informative of how we look at the cross. The cross has been perceived by many of us as God's bigger club coming in to beat the devil, beat the devil up and destroy through a bigger club. And I'm going to suggest, yes, there is a victory. No, there's no doubt. But it's not through having a bigger hammer, because we interpret it through the eyes of the kingdom of this world, how we as humans tend to do business in our own way of thinking, our own constructs. So for Jesus to argue back is just to create more blur. He is speaking in absolute clarity at this moment. And he states a fact. This is what actually is. Pilate, you think you are in control. You have no control, only that which has been given you. That is a fact. It's a fact for Pilate, and it's a fact for you and I. Instead, he names the illusion, Pilate's illusion. And he says, you would have no power over me unless it had been given you from above. There's the restatement of the text. In that one sentence right there, I'm calling it the false scaffolding of human control begins to topple. Now, Pilate thinks he's the edifice, what is true. He actually thinks he's talking out of truth. But Jesus is the truth. He represents what actually is. And Pilate is a mere scaffolding along the side. The same thing you and I and what we see what we're observing around us is merely scaffolding in next to what is actually true. And that it's crumbling. This is the idea that's we're moving into. The scaffolding crumbles. Power, as Jesus reveals it, it's not to be seized. I don't manipulate to get more power, but rather it is a gift. It's not to be acquired, it is given. That's the statement, the clarity that Jesus is speaking from of right here. What is true right here? To continue on, and then he finishes up with this enigmatic statement. For this reason, Jesus said, the one who handed me over to you has the greater sin. Now, again, a very common way to interpret this, the way I was taught, was wait till your father gets home. Yes, Pilate is in great error, but that Judas or those Jewish, however you look at it, those guys are really going to get punished. Pilate, you're going to get punished, but those guys are really going to get punished. That is from a retributive perspective. That's how one views this. They have the greater sin, so they're going to get the greater punishment. It all has to do with retribution. This is often understood as condemnation. I prefer to see it as revelation. And I'll explain why. Jesus is describing, this is my explanation. Guys, I'm not alone on this by any means. Jesus is describing the depth of blindness we humans suffer just because we're human. Even when truth is standing right before one's eyes. The demonstration of what we see in this image, truth is standing right before Pilate, and he can't go with it because of his own perceptions. You know, we express the term, you and I have countless times been with another individual, and we just don't get it, how that person thinks. And we say either audibly or in our minds, you mean you don't see this? I mean, what seems so obvious to you at that moment is not so obvious. That is a common human experience. Now, we humans can say this from a state of clarity, which lines up with what actually exists, or we can say it out of a state of illusion. It should be illusion. It should be clarity or illusion. Pilate is speaking from illusion. And so I guess you could say he's delusional. He is speaking from a delusional perspective. He thinks he's in charge. In reality, he's not. Jesus is speaking from clarity. Now, Pilate's sin, this is actually a direct comment on this phrase. Yes, Pilate is in sin. There's no question about it. And his sin is real. But it's the sin of confusion of one trapped within the machinery of self-perception, how we get gobbled up or framed up, confused about our own way of thinking. I mean, it is again not a Pilate problem. It is, but it's a human condition. The greater sin, as he's saying, Jesus is saying, the greater sin belongs to those who claim to see. And I don't think he's talking about Judas. Well, he could be. He's talking about Judas or the Jewish authority, those that are sentencing him. But the common denominator between these two is that they claim to have the truth. They claim to be, the Jewish authorities claim to be biblical. Judas is claiming that he is helping Jesus to establish the kingdom, his rightful kingdom. They claim to see because they were entrusted with the gift of light and truth, but yet they still choose what they have created, what's in their own head. Now, I think we want to remove punishment. Who's going to get the bigger hell here? That is not in the text here. It is about the greater sin. And so a way to look at this is to think of sin in the classical way of missing a mark. So think of an archery target with a bullseye. And Jesus is making a comparison here. Pilate's arrow, his attempt at the bullseye, is away from the bullseye, a margin away. But Jesus is making the statement here. It says, yes, your sin is great, but it's those people who claim to actually have the truth, they are missing the mark way further than you. And that is absolutely true in the text. We've seen it countless times within John's gospel, the synoptic gospels, over and over. So Jesus is simply stating the greater error. That's how I interpret it, is that the greater error is by those who claim they have the truth and turning him over. And God incarnate is allowing all this to happen. What this means for us. The kingdom of this realm, this is where I'm going to get to loss. The kingdom of this realm, what we've been looking at, we compared to, and the kingdom of this realm operates on the basis of what we could call loss. So I've got my little word explained. What I mean by that is that the way this world that we know so familiar operates is it's on the basis that there's only so much. And if I feel a loss and don't get what I feel I need, that puts me in a defensive posture of which then I fight back to get. I mean, that is a very broad and generalized statement, but it's operating out of loss, not out of abundance of the Father's presence in everything. It personally begins. This is how it happens at the personal level. And Pilate, I've got his picture because he's operating out of loss. It personally begins with the often false and unexamined assumption that I have the objective truth. I really got it. That's where we go wrong. I got the truth. I have the whole thing. And that is a false, unexamined assumption. And now there are times when we can speak truth, but I think it's, as I've gotten older, I've just learned to be a little more careful. What part of this is me, and what part of this is actually objectively true here. Now, this way of thinking is derived from either naivete on one hand or pride on the other. It's still a problem. We've been taught a certain way. I was thinking of a conversation I had recently. I just follow the Bible. Oh, yeah. Well, good. So do I. Well, and it's that statement from a person within our kind of background as an evangelical Bible following Christian has a lot of baggage connected to it. And that is, it's saying I cut everything else off because I have it. Well, I think that as we start to read other things, we see there's a lot bigger picture here. So it can be from a naive statement on one hand, or it can be just just pride on the others, as we would look through the Jewish officials. When a person's perception then is questioned, this is human. It's often perceived as potential loss, and we interpret that as a damaged person. My feelings are hurt, or that's ego is a technical term, but it's negative. When I'm questioned, it's negative, and I perceive it as threatening, which is really unfortunate. That's really unfortunate. Rather than seeking to understand, which would be the normal thing to do, is to humble ourselves and say, God, I never thought of it that way, or gee, let's talk more. Most often resistance wells up inside of us, and we feel like we got to protect something. We got to protect God. We got to protect our reputation. Something needs to be protected, and I need to come to the plate in order to do that. And that is talking about this process of loss. What follows is often, unfortunately, a turf battle. The arguing, which is really unfortunate, and it results in separation. Our history within the Protestant realm, fellas, is known for separation. 40,000 denominations, and not all of them separated out of anger, but by the large, guys, I'm just making a general statement here. I would guess the large majority, we tend to separate from people who hold to a different position. And that is really, really unfortunate. And it's not the heart of Jesus. John 17, that you may be one as we are one. A turf battle leading to separation. Okay, then what we do, because we've got this inner conflict going on in our heads, separation hurts. We care. There is some derogatory, some negative things we got to work through. And how we work through it, this is all on a personal level. We build a narrative from our realm. We find a group of Bible verses, and I'm talking in this language because this is our background. We find a group of verses and we weave them together to build a narrative that supports my position. It's been done for 2,000 years. A narrative is then manufactured in order to restore the inner peace. If I can somehow have a justification, and in our case, the biblical text, I can then feel better about me and I can espouse my particular whatever it is. And so I can go from there. And so what happens is a narrative is built in our heads that allows, yes, it does allow us to move forward, but it's moving forward partially blurred. Fellas, this, in my opinion, is the human, not everything exhaustive, but this is a representation of what we see on the screen in the text and what is the human condition that the incarnate God has stepped into to participate in, to die for on the cross. So we could be set free, not from the wrath of an angry God, but from ourselves, of what we do to ourselves, to each other. And so we can be free from ourselves. And that is the movement. Well, that's the movement I see John leading us down, and it's the movement that we're headed towards. Now, there is a lot here. I mentioned earlier some atonement theories, again, how things have influenced us. And so here's a brief explanation, and I'm going to go somewhere with this. In our study, we're stepping right now into the cross narrative itself. It's getting heated, what we're seeing. For over 2,000 years, people have been trying to understand and describe this mystery that now stands before us, the cross. Through the centuries, numerous interpretations and explanations have been offered, and we're joining the group. We're talking about the same thing. How we understand it is how we understand it. It's not like you find the right prize, and it doesn't work like that. What my goal is to try to understand it the way John is presenting it at the end of the first century. Now, right here, our goal isn't to figure it out, to get the right answer, or to tie everything up neatly, but simply to form a clear sense of how John saw the cross and what he hoped to communicate to those early followers of Jesus near the end of the first century. To help with that, I've put together two handouts that are loaded. You'll find they're in, I'll show you how to get there. You'll find the links below. And then on the next slide, there's a QR code. You guys all know how to use QR codes now, I'm sure. And so you'll find those, and I'll tell you where you'll find them. And then, so when you click on the link, or you put your phone over the QR code and hit open page, it'll take you to this very page. Now, I'm going to kind of lead you through how to do it. And then I'll add more resources as I think they're helpful. I think as we enter into this cross event, we need to understand, it's really important that we understand these various ways people have thought about the cross. And I'll point you to them as we go, so you'll see them loaded. Now, here are two papers. Both papers are one page. I'm trying to just keep things very simple. They're not simplistic, but I'm trying to be concise in my writing and as much as I can, keep things to one page. So you won't have a live link like this, because when you see this on our website, and I'll show you how to get there, it's not going to be a live link. That's why I put the QR code in. But if you go to, I'm hitting a live link, and on our website, Christ in the Rockies, let me get back here. If you just go to Christ in the Rockies, Homepage. Where's a? And you hit. Um, Here we go. Home. Let's see. How am I doing this? Oh, I got to go on this screen. I get confused on what screen I'm on. So I got to go over here. So this is our homepage at Christ in the Rockies. You just dial in Christ in the Rockies and you'll see this homepage. And what you do is go to blog resources and go to, there is the Gospel of John, which you can go to and it'll be blogged tomorrow. So you can see the slides. But you go to supplemental materials. And that's a section of the website that I'm putting all kinds of various materials to, to help us in our journey. And you'll see these various resources. You'll see the book and some resources we have, and you'll see birth, not behavior. And you get down here to John. And to get this, you can just hit the story of atonement with your finger, and then this page will come up. And then once you're there, you can download it right here. There is the downloaded version that if you wanted to have it to print it, here is the story of atonement, a companion to the views of atonement. And that's a one-page document I wrote to interpret the other document. And I think it's helpful. I mean, if you just can read 2 pages, you'll get a feeling for what we're talking about. If you don't want to download it, you don't have to. The text is right here on the screen, same text. But these are provided for you guys to help you in what we're talking about, this technical information. So we got the story of atonement here. We've got the views of atonement are here. And here we got laid out the ransom rescue theory, the Christus Victor, satisfaction, penal substitutionary, moral influence, and then a summary. And I've really worked hard to make this concise so you get these 7, I think there are 7 or 5, excuse me, 5. And then on the next page, it shows how they relate to each other. The views of the atonement, that other page. So this is where this is going to be. If you're interested in reading it. Now, if you don't want to do all that, all you have to do is go to the website and go under blogs resources to Gospel of John. And tomorrow, this image will be in that. It'll be the last slide. And you just take your phone and you put it over the QR code like you know how to do. I'm sure you all know. And the upper one leads to the paper Views of the Atonement. And then the lower one, the story of atonement, kind of a quick overview of 2,000 years of history. So that's a lot of information. I won't go into near the detail next time, but I'm already creating a couple other things that we're going to be looking at, really centered on when we get to verse 16, 17, and 18 in regard to that. So hopefully, fellas, this will help you in understanding how I'm thinking. And again, there is a huge amount of freedom for you all to do whatever you wish to do with it. But again, my intent is to try to communicate or try to understand it as John was trying to communicate to the first century. So guys, we're not going to do a table time today because we're out of time. But I'll be here next week. Will I? Yes, I'll be here next week for the next week. for the next session. And we'll move on to, I think, verse 12 next week. We've got about 3 weeks before we get to verses 16 and 17 and 18. And it's going to build, there's a real cohesion in what we'll be looking at. So anyway, whoa, a lot of talk. Thank you for your patience, guys. And we'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, you're welcome. Bye for now.